Welcome to I Wish You Could Hear This, where we explore great stories and simple proven steps to help you thrive in life, faith, and relationships.
In our research, we've heard hundreds of hope-filled strategies for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life that are grounded in science and consistent with biblical truth. And now you can hear them too.
I'm Shaunti Feldhahn.
And I'm Jeff Feldhahn.
One of the sneakiest and most dangerous patterns in marriage is the feeling that things just aren't fair. When we start thinking, my spouse just doesn't notice how hard I'm working, or my spouse just doesn't seem to notice how much I'm doing, it can really quickly spiral into exhaustion and into resentment. And yet there is a completely different approach that can free us up and lead to mutual appreciation and connection instead. That is what we are going to learn today on I Wish You Could Hear This with our amazing guest, Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Dr. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here.
Well, I'm so excited. So let me just introduce you to everyone if they may or may not be familiar with your work, because I have to confess that I'm completely fangirling here to have you on our podcast. You grew up traveling and then working with your father, Dr. John Van Epp, who's totally one of my heroes in the relationship education space. Like, if anyone has ever read the book, How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk, that's her dad. But then you took it to the next level. You got a PhD in psychology. You're today a really, truly a tremendous thought leader and author and speaker and podcaster. And your goal is helping people create great relationships, especially women. I was looking at your website. I love that you describe yourself as being, like your quote is, being on a mission to help women feel empowered in all of their relationships so that they feel whole, light, and deeply connected to those they love. I love that. So you're married to your high school sweetheart, and you have 2 elementary school age kids, which is awesome.
And we should say that you've had a new book just come out.
Yes.
It's called A Better Share. And I love the subtitle, which is How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. And you just had to stick that last one in there, didn't you?
That was strategic. That was a strategic placement.
Is this a book that's kind of just for women?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So way back when thank you for that intro. That was so generous. I really appreciate that. That was,
like I said, totally fangirling.
I'm moved by it. Thank you. So back when I was putting together the outline for this book and just kind of dreaming about what I wanted to include in it, I was talking with my editor and I said, I just have this deep mission or desire to write a book that invites men to the conversation. So a lot of the content on the mental load, awesome. On social media and in certain spheres, it's kind of a charged topic. And it's charged around really this whole sort of, feeling of men are the problem. Men are the problem. We're angry at men. We're going to blame them. This would get better if they would change. And so what often happens is they feel sort of alienated from the conversation, immediately defensive about it. And so I wanted to add to the conversation in a way that welcomes men to it, because if we want them to change, they have to feel comfortable engaging in this work. They have to feel that their perspective matters. And so it's really a book for couples, and it's a book that has been so well received by men. I think one of the best messages I've received so far is that this woman ordered the book, opened it, left it on her kitchen table, went and ran some errands. It was not a passive-aggressive placement either. She just left it. She just left it out, running around. And she came home and she found her husband halfway done with it. And she said, it has
awesome.
Right? It's just, and that's the strategic placement of sex. And it's covered in the book. It's not yes. false advertising. She said it has opened up some of the most meaningful conversations we've had in our relationship so far. And so to me, it feels like that's the success right there.
I'm going to ask a question as a guy, since I don't kind of frequent the corners of the internet where the mental load is highly charged.
Lucky you.
Yeah. I mean, well, can you explain what you mean by that, at least for us guys and for women that, maybe don't know the language around it either?
Okay, so I'll start with the 30,000 foot definition, and then I'm going to give I don't always, but I'm going to give the in the weeds definition, because this is the piece that men miss and that women struggle to put words to, so it can be really helpful. So 30,000 foot, the mental load is the seemingly never-ending running to-do list we carry around in our heads. It has two major components. Which is, number one, the majority of tasks involved in it are invisible. The invisibility piece is really important because it can make it hard to explain to your partner, to other people, this whole sense of overwhelm. It's also hard to hand things off, because if you're the only one seeing these things, or you've been doing them in the dark for a really long time, nobody's actually aware that you're doing the things. The second piece is that it takes up cognitive real estate. This essentially means, and I'm saying it in the most layman terms, it crowds out space in your brain. Brain space, that's really important for lots of things. Decision making, regulation, getting in the mood for sex, all of these types of things take up space in our brains. Everybody has a mental load. This is not, the mental load is not exclusively a women's issue. That's one point of contention that comes up during the conversation. Well, I have one too. And it's like, of course, my kids have a mental load. But when it comes to home and family life, research says this, it's primarily carried by women. And so this is where this resentment piece starts to brew. Okay, in the weeds. Is it okay if I keep going?
Absolutely.
Please,
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've got questions bubbling up from a guy.
Okay, good. Don't forget the questions. Okay, so in the book, I have a visual of this. So if you can just imagine a Venn diagram with 3 circles. The mental load includes 3 domains of tasks. So the first is the physical. This is where men tend to crush it. This is what men tend to think the mental load is. If I mow the lawn, if I do the dishes, if I take out the garbage, you should feel less overwhelmed. Did I help you enough? And we're like, no, I'm still overwhelmed. That's not it. It's not just the doing. The second category is the mental. This is like the making of the lists. What do I need from the grocery store? What do I need to do for work today? Kind of thinking through those steps. The third is the one that men tend to not fully understand, and this is the one that tends to really weigh women down, and that's the emotional labor involved in the mental load. Okay, this is a mouthful. The emotional labor is the regular, ongoing cause and effect calculations to try to maximize positive experiences of members in your family. So these things are either short-term, so it might be something along the lines of, I'm heading out with the kids and we're going to miss nap time, and how am I going to mitigate them having a tantrum? And so you're going through all these calculations to how to make that work. Big picture might be something more like educational decisions. Do we go to school in our community, be connected, less quality school? Do we go to school outside our community, not connected, but better education? Thinking through these kind of things that feel like the stakes are really high. The emotional labor is very hard to articulate. It's all invisible. It's hard to hand off if you don't trust your partner to think things through and do the calculations in the same way. So there's a lot of kind of holding on to this. And it's really hard to outsource, because how do you pay somebody to do stuff for your family that requires such deep knowing? So here's the final piece to this visual. At the intersection of these 3 circles is something that I call the triple threat. The majority of tasks involved in the mental load of home and family life occur at this intersection. They are triple threat tasks, which means that you have to do physical, mental, and emotional labor to complete it. So, for example, dinner is not just dinner. Dinner is thinking through what's in your fridge, what's in your pantry, figuring out how to get that one missing ingredient. It's thinking through, how am I going to get everybody in the family to eat enough dinner that my son's not asking for a bar at bedtime? It's thinking through all of these sort of other issues that are often invisible, that are all about the caretaking of our family. So if in a relationship, a woman is overwhelmed and she says that to her partner or her husband, and he says, well, make me a list. And he sees the list and he's like, I just don't get why you're so overwhelmed, which is really common. Part of it is because each item on that list for her unpacks to include a multitude of effort, energy, thought, and work.
So it's like a Matryoshka doll, like one of those Russian nesting dolls.
Yes.
Like you have the thing, you have the issue, but then inside it, you've got the thing inside that, and you've thought the thought inside that, and the feeling inside that. And now I need to say out loud that some of why I'm interested in talking to you, because Dr. Morgan, seriously, like, you need to understand, in order to understand while you're talking to us, that this man sitting next to me, he is like a hero at really all the mental load stuff, very unusually so. Because like when people are like, oh, oh, Shaunti, I'm so sorry you're sick. I'll bring over a casserole so that you don't have to cook. And I'm like, he's actually the one that does all the cooking, or like, I don't notice the laundry. He's the one that does the laundry. So I can't really legitimately be in this conversation in the same way.
So thank you for that. Some of it's true. Some is she's just being very kind. I'm going to ask a question here, just because I'm cheap and I want free therapy for us. But two, and not trying to be insensitive, but ask this on behalf of my fellow males on the planet. So I get the mental load now. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
And I get the emotional cost of it, of that one particular aspect. Here's something in Shaunti and Jeff's life that I experience, and I know other guys have experienced. Shaunti, when she looks at something, is truly adept and skilled, but really wants to remove all possibilities of something going wrong. And so part of her mental load is solving all of these potential issues that could arise, or at least
that's part of the emotional load.
Exactly.
That she was talking
at least
about.
Minimizing the risk of them.
I'm thinking about all possible outcomes.
Correct. And as for a guy, we're going, 80% of those are not going to occur. Maybe 20%. I'll give 20% a possibility. And if that does happen, we'll work to solve it when it occurs, as opposed to spending that energy on the 80% that just don't occur. Is there a way of turning that off? I know I'm asking on behalf of every guy out there. Can we help her turn that off?
I don't know the answer to that. I do think that's a common thread, though. And which is that men tend to be really efficient with how they think through things. It's like we don't have, like, my husband sometimes will make these comments around emotion. Like, he's gotten really good over the years of kind of sitting with it and letting me kind of process. And then he reaches a point and he's like, this just sounds like drama. Like, we're moving on. Like, we're done. The emotion is not efficient sometimes. And so I do think this is a common piece for couples, is that the woman is kind of just like belaboring the decision because she's thinking everything through, and the guy's like, let's just go for it, and then we'll deal with the aftermath. But it's real pain
for her.
It is real pain. It is really real pain. And I think this is another important reason why we do have to welcome men to the conversation, and there are legitimate differences in how men and women operate that sometimes ends up affecting how the mental load is shared, and it's not necessarily the guy's fault.
Well,
she's taking that on.
Can I just jump in here for a second? Because literally, you and I were on stage day before yesterday, at a marriage event where we were explaining, in the section where we were talking about, here's the things that may be under the surface in your spouse that you may not know, because there's statistically some pretty significant gender differences. We were talking about the brain wiring.
Yep.
And that women, if you think of it like a computer desktop, like men, you have a window open and do that thought or that worry or whatever it is you're thinking about, and you click the little X and it goes away and you open the next thought. Where women, we have all these different thoughts, all these different windows. I'm 10 windows open at a time. And if something's bugging me, I can't click the X and make it go away because it's just going to pop back up. And so part of it, I think, is that that's a piece of the emotional load, is that all those things, you may say, there is a tiny chance of that happening. We're not irrational.
Right.
But if it's a big potential problem, it's still going to make its way into one of our windows, and it's bugging us.
I included a little section, 2 chapters in my book around some of the differences between men and women. In part why I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. We don't like to acknowledge that these days for some reason, but we need to acknowledge some of our differences so we can depersonalize how they show up in our relationship. A lot of us think like, my husband is just insensitive because he kind of operates in this way, or he wants to try to fix something instead of sit in the emotion with me. It's like, actually, this is a pretty universal thing. There is some connection to how we're wired. Let's depersonalize this so we can actually talk about some strategic ways of navigating this as a team, as a couple together. So that's where these differences become really important to understand, to acknowledge, because it's usually pretty much a shared experience. The other thing I would say is that I tend to think about how we handle the mental load as a between issue. So there's couple dynamics that have to be addressed, but there's a within issue, which is what am I bringing to this situation? How am I contributing to it? How am I making things harder? How am I showing up in my relationship? We have to acknowledge how we show up. So if we are somebody who kind of ruminates on a decision, who belabors it, who obsesses over it, that is some individual work. If it's causing us pain that we might have to start dealing with. So it might be, really practical things like, I'm going to allow myself 10 minutes to obsess over all the outcomes. And when we're done with those 10 minutes, timer off, I'm making the decision and I'm moving forward.
Wow.
Yes.
Right. Or in this circumstance, I know I'm going to belabor it. And I this is kind of how I operate sometimes. I'm married to an amazing, quick decision maker. He's a great decision. So I am going to lean on my husband when I find myself getting stuck in a loop like this, because I respect his decision making and he's much faster at it than I am. So I think there is some like ownership we have to take around these things and say, this is making my emotional labor way heavier than it needs to be. I need to figure out some strategies as an individual to navigate this.
And speaking for or on behalf of guys, at least I think I am, there have been times, and more often than I'd wish or care to admit, that I've made Shaunti feel silly, or I've been dismissive of the fact that she's wrestling through these things. Yeah. And it's hurt her in ways that, I didn't really want to do.
Well, you didn't necessarily know that you were doing.
Yeah, I thought I was being helpful,
Yes.
helping you become more like me. And oh my gosh, am I so glad she's not more like me.
Can you imagine being married to yourself?
What
so
awful
annoying.
thought that would be. There's ways that we as guys, Paul says that we're to love our wives as Christ loved the church. Yeah. He never belittled us. He never makes us feel dumb, stupid for how we feel about
worrying
something.
About whatever.
Yeah. So that's thank you for sharing that, because that I'm sitting here sort of kind of convicted.
Okay. Well, let's actually say for anyone out there, whether it's maybe someone who ruminates a lot and has to maybe take ownership of some of that mental load is me. Like, I have to be okay with a little uncertainty. I have to be okay with
a lack of control.
Because, I guess that is part of that, isn't that?
Oh, sorry, I threw that one in there.
No, well, I think now that you say that, of course that's part of it. And that isn't necessarily women always. That can be men as well. But I think probably statistically more likely to be some women. But if we say, okay, maybe it's I have to take ownership of that, or maybe it's the guy saying I have to take ownership of the fact that she just has a lot more emotional load than I was recognizing, and it's real, and and it should be shared to some degree, or at least the awareness needs to be shared. Then so the next question that everybody is like, tell us what to do about it, right? Like I'm sure everybody is screaming in their car, like, or looking at YouTube, like, tell us, how do we address this? Because I will tell everybody listening to this that this issue of kind of the load of running a household, running a life, this is one of the main, it sounds so minor, and it's not. It is one of the main things that is always there in the background, and the successful couples figure out how to navigate it. And if you can give those that are still in that spot of I am just at my wit's end, it feels so unfair, or somebody's always feeling blamed, if you can give us some starting points, what do we do?
Sure.
What do we do about it?
Are you okay? I kind of want to round out one more thing with what we were saying.
Please.
And then I'll come
Absolutely.
back. Because I'm thinking about something that's important to just put also on the table about this like rumination or things like that. It's kind of going back to something Jeff said, which a dynamic that also can occur is that maybe she ruminates a little bit more and he dismisses or is too sort of like blasé about it. Things will get done. Why are you worrying so much about this?
Yes.
It's not a big deal. The kids are going to be fine. I grew up walking to 5 miles to school. You know, like that kind of mentality. Like, my dad spanked me and I'm fine. Why are you researching all this stuff? So,
You've listened in on our family conversations, obviously.
it's almost all sort of the same
This
stuff.
is
It
so
really is
common. Yes.
It's so common. And what happens then, so maybe she does ruminate a little bit, but now she's hearing that her partner is not in it with her and he is not going to participate in this work. And so she has to like tighten the reins even more. She has to dig in a little more. She has to calculate a little more to protect those that she loves and control.
So she feels like he's not part of it with her.
Right.
And so now her mental load just went up.
Went up, and there's a little bit of damage being done because she doesn't have a partner who's there for her. She doesn't have a partner who understands her. She feels more alone. You already feel kind of invisible in this part of the relationship. And she can't trust him to engage in this work too. So that's also, I didn't want to leave that part out. To make women seem like, oh, this is your thing that you need to deal with. There's often this dynamic at play. And so she's kind of feeling, well, if I don't do it, nobody's thinking about it. So now I have this much more to worry about. I'm worrying for the both of us now. And so it's really important. If he's not, stereotypically, it's usually her doing this type of work. If he's not good at this type of work, he at least needs to know how to show up for her in a way that doesn't leave her feeling more alone. Around this area.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And I mean, even I will say early on in our marriage, so like in our relationship, as you can tell from the conversation, Jeff is not as sort of stereotypical, and it's partly because I hate to say this out loud, but I'm the messy one, he's the neat one. And so some of the things that are like, it doesn't bother me to have the mail piled up on the island. Like I just haven't gotten to it. It drives him nuts. So guess who cares more about like keeping things neat? And so it's a little more of a load. But because of that, he actually understands more of when the women are like, their hair is on fire, like trying to get the husband to show up. You get that intimately to some degree. However, even with that dynamic, there were years in our marriage where I had the same concerns that you're talking about because, for example, with the kids, he wouldn't think about like who's scheduling the kids' doctor's visits and who's going to make sure that they get to play dates and who's going to make sure that they get to the activities and the school forms need to be signed and like all this stuff related to running the household and children that wasn't necessarily like, hey, the laundry has to get done. But all that other stuff, was really, a lot of it was falling on me. And it wasn't until, I don't know, years down the road that you started to go, thank you for doing that.
For sure.
So that, what you just said, I think is so crucial, that if you're not natural at this, you can at least figure out how to show up in a way
Right.
that doesn't dismiss your spouse's concerns.
Yes.
Did I summarize that correctly?
You did awesome.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
if we are then taking the next step and going, okay, so let's just pretend. So we have, somebody in our life who's about to get married, who is our daughter, who's 25 years old. She is going to be entering into this whole new life. How should she set things up, she and her fiance, from the beginning, so that they both see this as fair? Because there are these 3 areas, and we may not always see each other.
Okay, there's a lot to say, but I'll start with one piece that is important to understand, how we kind of get to a place where a lot tends to fall on women. So I'll explain that so she can keep an eye out.
Okay.
But eventually, it's best if they develop a shared language around it. So then I'll cover some of that, because a lot of this stuff isn't going to really hit until they welcome a kid into the mix.
Okay, and also
change.
speak to the couple who's in their 30s or 40s.
Okay.
They're deep in the children raising phase as well.
Okay.
What do we do?
So one thing for your daughter that I want her to pay attention to is something that I call piling on of precedents. So this is one of the ways the mental load gets really full, and seemingly very quickly, especially after kids enter the picture, that we're not that aware of. So how this works is that early on in our relationship, in like dating courtship time,
Okay.
and I'm broad strokes here, so I'm going to be stereotyping a bit, but women tend to do things for their partners out of love, because it feels good to take care of somebody that you love. So, for example, I remember, early on, and then after we got married, doing things like, oh, Mother's Day's coming up. I sent your mom a present already. And it's like, aren't I amazing? It makes us feel good. Like, I'm on it. And he'd be like, he'd be so enthusiastic about his appreciation. Or for the longest time, this was so dumb of me, I would shop, I would cook dinner, and I would clean it up. I'd be like, you rest. We're both working. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm like, you just relax. It's what I saw growing up. So I was kind of just replicating that in my own marriage. But we do things out of love because it feels good to give. And it's a beautiful thing about people. It feels good to give. However, what happens is that the first time we'll get an enthusiastic appreciation. You're the best. What would I do without you? I love you. You're amazing. All that stuff. The second time, it's probably still appreciation, but maybe like, oh, thanks. Well, you do that already. I expect it. By, a couple times in, it's almost as if this particular task is completely removed from our partner's brain, and we have now officially taken it on. It's now the thing that we do. They're not even worrying about it. It's not malicious. It's just that, why am I going to take up space in my brain with the thing that you handle? So we have to be prepared to own the things that we do, maybe forever. Or you're going to have to walk it back, which I have ways of walking it back. So what happens is, early in dating, these things pile on. You get married, you start doing these things, especially in early marriage. It's just kind of fun and romantic, and you don't have kids. You pile these things on. Plate's already kind of full probably, but maybe you don't even realize it. And then kids enter the mix, and literally overnight, responsibilities grow exponentially.
Yes.
Just massive. And women tend to jump in that early, when the baby's born, just naturally, for a multitude of reasons. And so we tend to take that stuff on really quickly too. And sometimes we even feel protective of those things. And so we're like, I kind of say the game is rigged a bit. We're sort of set up to kind of enter this stage of life at a massive sort of imbalance in who does what. And so I would say to your daughter, be aware of that. Be aware of how you're piling these things on early in your relationship. I'm not saying to be stingy with how you take care of each other, but talk about it. Because part of how it becomes yours forever is that the stuff starts to become invisible. stocking of toilet paper. Like I cannot tell you how much time I spend emptying out the kids' drawers, emptying out things that don't fit, shopping for them, keeping a running inventory. My husband's not even aware of these things, but I don't need him to be, right? He has other things. But that could be something that really bugs me. This stuff becomes invisible. So she needs to be aware that this is something that's probably going to happen. So if she's taking it on, you better love to do it. And number 2, try talking about some of this stuff. It's like the simplest things. Oh, we got invited to a party. By the way, I'm going to RSVP this time. Why don't you pick up the gift? So be aware of how these things are discussed in the relationship, negotiated, and try to keep them as part of the conversation so they don't become invisible. So
I love that.
I really do. I you know what? And that whole invisibility thing is so real. It is so real. My favorite scripture is Psalm 103:2, which says, "Praise the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits." The psalmist was having to remind himself of all of those things that become invisible, of what God does and has done in our lives. And shouldn't we do that with our spouse? Make a regular practice so that it isn't invisible.
Yeah.
But you don't see what you don't know, what you can't
Yes.
see.
Well, and if I could just, I'm thinking about any of the men listening to this and to the wives who maybe their brain is really focused on kid stuff right now. And they're nodding as you're talking, right? Like, and going, you're right. I feel invisible. That's what it is. I think that there's an invisibility that men feel.
Oh, yes.
And it's the constant in the back of their mind, how am I going to provide for the family?
Oh,
And
yes.
that always being on their mind. I can't remember what the number was. We actually did it on our big survey, but it was more than 70%. Like I want to say it was like 78% or something, where it's always in the back of their mind. And so that, talk about a mental load that's always there. I mean, that's a big one. And I don't think that a lot of women get that, because we found that unless you're a single mom, most women don't think that way. Like it's
there. It's an issue.
It's there,
but not at that level.
Finances are an issue for everybody, but there's something in the male heart, and I honestly think some of this is created by God, and some of this was created by the fall, and it's there in a really pressured, burdensome way for men. They wouldn't have it any other way. And what we found is, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with this, we found that statistically, the vast majority of men, and again, I can't remember what the number is, but it's in the high 70s, said that even if their wife made more than enough money to support the entire family, perfectly, it makes no difference at all to his feeling that it's my job to provide, and that's still there. So I think that's a invisibility thing that I just want to say on behalf of the men listening to this, that we as women, many of us, not all, but many of us have to grapple with as well.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because I talk about this too, which is that, our socialization is very different as men and as women. And we tend, I think, again, I'm on the internet more than I like to be. So I see these things. I think we try to like push back, women especially are trying to push back against these things, but it still remains true that for the most part, men are socialized and valued for how they provide and protect financial and physical security to their family. And what I found, so I surveyed around 535 women, and then I did interviews with men and women. And when I talk to men, I ask them, what do you get defensive about the most when around this topic? And it's around this piece, which is that it's almost as if she doesn't realize how much I'm worrying about providing for the family. Or don't forget that everything costs money. And I think this is getting, undervalued or lost a little bit in the conversation, because more and more women are working. And so the argument is, well, I work too, so, whatever. But I think it's really tied to men's sense of self, their self-worth, how they feel they're really like bringing value to the family. And so we're sort of changing the rules a little bit as women are in the workplace a little bit more, and we're changing our expectations for relationships, which is that we're saying, okay, well, we want you to provide and protect, and also like we want you to be more emotionally attuned to everything. And so it's just taking a bit of time for this adjustment to occur. But I think a lot of men grapple and struggle with this and maybe even feel like they can't say it.
Oh, I think a lot of men, that's the reason I wanted to mention it.
And
I don't feel like
and
they
I think
can.
if men listen to this podcast, you've just gained a whole bunch of fans, Dr. Morgan. I mean it. This is so, it hits a guy's heart, and it, thank you.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
Thank you for bringing it up.
Well, it's one of those things that I've noticed, and this is because I'm a researcher, because I'm a statistics nerd. I notice, and I have for years, that there's a mental, like, non-level playing field when it comes to this issue. And it's almost like, okay, just to I'm going to lay it out there, and some people in our audience probably won't like this, but some people will go, yes, right on. So like 77% of women who have children over the age of 3 work. Okay. So 77% are in the workplace. However, and I can't remember what the exact number is. However, it's only something like 40 something. I want to say like 42%. It's some number like that. Only 42% work full time. Because women are more likely to want to take on. I'm going to get all sorts of angry emails.
Yes, I know. But you're very brave.
It's just true. Well, it's just accurate, okay?
Yes.
Thinking something should be different doesn't make it different. So anyway,
Amen.
but most of the time, not all, but most of the time, the women are taking on I'll work 25 hours a week so that when the kids are done with school, I can be with them while the kids are young. That's a decision that a lot of moms want to make, and they're grateful that their spouse is working full time. And so that, the family is provided for, but somehow that doesn't make its way into the calculus of the mental load. And so why am I arguing the men's side?
I don't know, but keep going.
But I feel like the answer that you're saying is awareness, real awareness on both sides.
Yeah.
And the only way that's going to happen is if we talk about it. So next step is, can you give us some, as we sort of, I'm looking at our time, I want to be careful, but can you give us some next steps in terms of how we have these conversations?
Sure.
And some things that we can do?
Yes. So I'm going to start with a very practical, like, you can try this today type of thing. And then I'm going to get into the bigger picture stuff. So I do experiments on my husband in our marriage. And I don't
know what that feels like.
Me either.
I don't tell him. And, I used to keep it to myself, and I've started talking about it a lot. And so now I'm experimenting if he ever listens to a full podcast episode of mine, and I've determined he does not. So he still doesn't know. So I'm going to keep doing them. Okay. So one of the experiments I wanted to do was to try to find really practical ways of making the invisible visible. So I started narrating not everything, but certain things that I would do around the house. I would just narrate them. Now, there's a couple of asterisks by this. Number one, you cannot say it in a snarky tone, because a lot of couples will get in the hardship Olympics where they'll be like, do you know what I did today? And then they and the other person's like, well, do you know what I did? And then they're like competing.
Nothing good comes from that.
No, but a lot of couples get really entrenched in that.
Give us an example of narrating.
So I did this maybe 2 years ago, where I said, hey, babe. He was sitting up at the counter, and I was like, hey, babe, I just want to let you know that I enrolled our son Roy into baseball. And I'd be like, okay. I'd be like, I submitted all of the paperwork. Okay, it's crazy these days how much you have to do. I submitted the paperwork. I uploaded his birth certificate. I'm surprised I don't have to submit a hair sample. I paid the fees. I downloaded the app. You need to get the app too, but I wanted you to know it's handled. So here's like my analysis of this. Number one, he would never have known all that's involved in enrolling Roy into Little League. Now he does. So I took something that's invisible and I made it visible. Because also, a lot of women will do these things and not care. Like, oh, I just took care of it. But then maybe later in the week, things pile on and they start getting irritated. And all of a sudden, all of these things rush in as examples of all of the things that their husband doesn't notice or their partner doesn't notice. So I diffused that in me by sharing it with him. Now he knows. And then the second thing that it does, which is really important, is it gives him the opportunity to give me appreciation. He always responds by saying, oh my gosh, thank you for handling that. Now, I never would have received that if he didn't know. And so now I'm getting one of the things I need. When I surveyed women, top 2 things they want from their partners is more initiative taking and more appreciation. Appreciation is really easy to give. It's a big win in relationships. So I'm getting that appreciation. So a couple of things over time that has happened as I've done this experiment. One, my husband's more in the know. You know, he now knows these invisible steps, so he can step into initiative taking because he's aware. We have created an atmosphere of free-flowing appreciation for how we add value to our home and family life.
Wow, that's awesome.
A lot of people get defensive. You know, oh, I did these things. It's partially how you say it and then also just the tone in the relationship. But we've normalized sharing what we do. And nobody's competing or feeling like you're accusing me of not doing enough. And the cool thing, still he doesn't know that I do this, is that he now narrates the things that he does. As a man who has said, he doesn't know that I did this. And now he
doesn't
does it
know
too.
that you were narrating, but he has started narrating. That is awesome.
Yes.
Don't let him listen to this podcast.
I know. Well, I know. He's not gonna. So, but it's what, because he's a guy, he's one of those guys where this is a whole nother conversation we could have, but he's one of those guys who is like, you know, I don't need anything. I don't need appreciation. But here he is. Hey, babe, just so you know, I submitted our taxes and I invested this and I took care of this. And I can say, I'm so glad I don't have to think about that. Thank you for what you do for our family.
Aww. It's like,
That's fantastic.
It's like when you know what I'm going to say, right? It's
Go ahead.
It's like when I come home, I've been out running errands or something. And, you know, I pull into the driveway and about 5 or 10 minutes later, I'm in the house and Jeff is kind of hanging around. And at some point, he'll go, did you see the hedges?
I know that place.
Like he worked, he slaved outside,
Yes.
he mowed the lawn, he did the hedges, and I didn't say thank you. I didn't notice, or I did, and I didn't come out of my mouth. And so, yes. And so there's nothing wrong with that.
That's fantastic.
No.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Or you can even say something like, oh my God, you didn't notice, but let me give you a tour of the yard. Let me show you what I did.
That may have happened in our marriage a few times.
That's a great idea.
I love it.
But it takes it off. Can I just say directly what that does? It takes off the table the you should have noticed.
Right.
Yes.
By building
Correct.
a practice of making it overt and making the invisible visible. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
You've taken that you should have noticed and you didn't thing off the table because we're all human. Like we don't notice enough, or we do, but we just don't think to say it. So
it's
and then we
fantastic.
personalize it, because then we personalize it. We're like, oh, he doesn't care about what I did, or she doesn't care about all the work. She doesn't value she expects it. We create these narratives that end up really affecting our relationship. So
is there something else that you were going to say other than make the invisible visible? Okay.
It's the least sexy answer, but it's one of the most important, which is you have to get really good at talking about it. And I think, and this is actually one of the biggest hangups for people, is that they can't even get to a place of regularly talking about this part of their relationship because so much defensiveness, dismissiveness, the hardship Olympics, that stuff gets in the way. And so what happens is the person initiating, usually the woman, the conversation starts to shut down, doesn't address it again because it's too much of a hassle. She goes on carrying it, and this is when the divide starts to build in the relationship, the resentment starts to build. So being able to talk about this regularly because the mental load shifts every single day. There's new stuff coming up. There's new things on our plates. There's new changes and things to our schedule. Somebody gets sick, that's always changing. So we have to be able to talk about it regularly. So one thing, there's so many things I want to say. Okay. One thing is how you frame the conversation. And I don't believe anybody else says this when it comes to the mental load who talks about this stuff. You have to frame the conversation as positioning the mental load as the shared enemy in the relationship. There was one weekend where I think I folded laundry for 3 hours and Chad was doing stuff around the house that entire time. My husband is a doer. He's always doing something. We went to bed that night. The kitchen was dirty. I think it was like 3 hours of laundry, 2 hours of kitchen. The kitchen was dirty. There was new laundry that needed to be folded, and he still hadn't finished what he was doing. So I say this to say the amount of things that we're trying to accomplish as modern families is just, it's more than is humanly possible. The mental load is relentless. It's endless. There's pressure to be productive all of the time. We've kind of absorbed that. We need to always be doing. We're distracted by our devices. We spend so much time on our devices, pulled out of the present. We feel this sort of pressure to always be performing and participating and doing all of the things. Modern family life, especially when you got these little kids, you're in those years, is relentless. So it makes sense if the mental load is super heavy in your relationship. It's not necessarily that there's something wrong with either one of you. Maybe, but for the most part, there's just more on your plates than you can handle. And so when you understand that, you can talk about the mental load as, hey, we have this thing. I want to give a name to it. If you don't know about it, I'm going to explain it. As you probably notice, I'm stressed out and overwhelmed a lot. And part of it is there's way too much on our plates than we can handle. And I'm carrying a lot right now, and it's starting to weigh on me, and it's affecting our relationship, how I show up as a parent. It's affecting my quality of life. I want to talk about how you and I can tackle this better together so that we can enjoy our family life so much more. So are you willing to enter into the conversation? And so starting it from that point gives you the best chance of success. I'm not saying you won't come up against some defensiveness, but sort of spelling all of that out really does help. And it's true. It's true that family life is just a lot. It's just a busy time.
Wow. Yeah. I love the fact that you're encouraging people to talk about it with the assumption that the other person wants to engage.
Yeah.
They may not get it. They may not understand it immediately. But that would be my encouragement, is to have that conversation. And then if you don't get the response you want, don't give up. Assume that your spouse is for you. They don't quite understand what you're saying. And so this will give you that opportunity, and maybe do that little technique of making the invisible visible by narrating some of the things, because that will help, as long as you do it with the right tone and the right attitude, and you're not, look what I did today that you didn't notice. As long as you do it that way, I could see how those two things together could be very, very crucial.
I say in the book, gracious interpretations lead to more positive interactions. And it's not always easy, but it's something we have to practice, and it does help when you're entering into this conversation. And I understand, the women out there who feel like they've tried to have it, who feel like they've tried to kind of coach their husbands or their partners along to pull them, into this, and they're not getting what they want. I understand the frustration around this, but it's just so incredibly important to keep trying. If you're wanting to remain married, you need to keep trying to have this conversation.
And have a good marriage.
Yes,
not just remain married, but have a good marriage.
Enjoy your marriage.
So,
yes.
I feel like this has just been a phenomenal session for Jeff to learn. I mean, really, I'm seriously, and it was.
Sounds like you're doing great.
Because I'm cheap, it was awesome that I didn't have to pay client fees or anything. So thank you. This was amazing.
So we always end.
Yeah, by asking, if you had to boil everything down, and I know it's really, really hard, to one point that you would like a listener here to take away. And just say, there was lots of information in the 45 minutes that we talked, but remember this.
You're on the same team. And it might not feel like it right now,
Oh, that's so good.
but at one point you were, and life pulled you apart. And so you're on the same team. You just have to find some new ways to navigate all that's on your plates and all the demands that are kind of stressing the relationship out.
That's fantastic.
That's good.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm serious.
good.
If folks, if
Gets
folks
your approval.
can
Okay.
no, if they can latch onto that and hold onto that, because it's true.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you've written books. You're a sought after speaker. You have your own podcast. I mean, how else? I mean, give us a list of how people can reach you.
How can people find you in your ministry and see what you're doing?
So I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. My handle is Dr. So it's Dr. Morgan Cutlip. That's the same as my website, drmorgancutlip.com. My book is just both of my books. My hearts are in my book. So A Better Share is the one for couples. And then I wrote a book for moms called How to Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself. And so I'd love people to check those out. I don't know when this will come out, but I'm working on some new, really affordable. I like to try to maintain, affordability in what I offer. I do a lot of audio products, but I'm coming out with some products specifically around the mental load for men.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
For men that are very just to the point. I'm going to be coming out with one for couples and then eventually one for women as well. So I'd love for people to check those out.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we'll put that stuff in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
And just seriously, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show today. I want everybody to check out this book, A Better Share.
Absolutely.
And, please also, we're going to ask everybody, please share today's episode with someone who needs it, which most of us do. And please tag Dr. Morgan Cutlip on all your social media channels.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having me.
Morgan.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to I Wish You Could Hear This. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, forward today's audio or video link to a friend, counselor, or pastor who would be encouraged.